Welcome once again to Lehto's Law. Here's Steve Lehto.
Had quite a few people send me this story, and this is one of those ones that really has you pulling your hair out, because a man's filed a class action lawsuit against Canon, seeking more than $5 million in damages over printers that won't scan documents when ink cartridges are low. Kevin Shelby wrote this for BusinessInsider.com, but I saw this reported many places. And we've talked before about how office equipment is expensive. And for instance, toner cartridges have gotten really expensive. And the question is, do you have to use a toner cartridge made by the manufacturer of the equipment you bought? That's one issue. Can you get them refilled by a third party? It's another issue. The question, of course, is what if the machine stops functioning because it's out of ink? And you say, well, Steve, a printer won't print without ink. Yeah, what if you have a multi-purpose machine that both scans, faxes, and prints? If it runs out of ink, should it stop scanning? You say, well, no, that doesn't make any sense. Well, it does if you are the manufacturer and you want people to buy more ink. You have the machine shut down when it runs out of ink. Except, should it shut down all of its functions? That's the question. A Queens man filed a class action lawsuit against Canon, saying some of the electronic giants' all-in-one printers won't scan unless they have ink cartridges installed. The man who's the plaintiff in the complaint filed Tuesday in U.S. District Court in Eastern District of New York says, in truth, the all-in-one printers do not scan or fax when the devices have low or empty ink cartridges. Canon's advertising claims are false, misleading, and reasonably likely to deceive the public, he said. And of course, those are allegations in the lawsuit, I believe. He purchased the so-called all-in-one device, which is a Canon PIXMA MG2522 from Walmart in March of this year. In the complaint, he says that that's the machine at the heart of this lawsuit. Plaintiff would not have purchased the device or would not have paid as much for it had he known that he would have to maintain ink in the device in order to scan documents. Canon did not immediately respond to a request for comment. This is a kind of a case where Canon should have responded. And I've mentioned before how funny it always is when someone contacts somebody, oftentimes law enforcement, says, or a big company, says, what's going on here? And they say, well, an investigation is ongoing. Can't talk to you. An investigation is ongoing. Someone at Canon knows whether or not the machine shuts down when it runs out of ink. That is not something that they're actually holding meetings about right now going, does that happen? Hey, does anybody here know what our machines do when they run out of ink? Does anybody? Hey, someone call Bill in engineering, see if he knows. Of course they know. Okay? So Canon did not immediately respond to a request for comment. The lawsuit said it expects a full list of plaintiffs to be more than 100. They'd seek more than $5 million in total damages and costs. And what they're getting at there is in a class action. Class action is where somebody files a lawsuit and says, look, something happened to me, but it happened to a lot of other people just like me, meaning that they have the same legal situation I've got. So if you buy a product, you bought this thing here, it's a widget. I know it looks like a pen, but it's a widget. You buy this widget, and it turns out that this widget is defective, and you know other people bought the widget. Well, if they bought one, they have the same problems you do if you've got problems with this widget and they're all alike. So when you file a class action lawsuit, you need a plaintiff to step forward and go, I'll be the class rep. The lawsuit gets filed usually with just the class rep or a couple class reps. And then you say, we're going to identify the members of the class later. And somewhere along the line, you're going to have to come back into court and say, we now have identified a huge group of people, and they're identified thus. And you'd say, anyone who purchased one of these from particular sellers maybe, or for particular price, or in a certain time frame, or if we discover that this widget became defective in the model year of 2021, people who bought the 2021 widget, that kind of thing. But you're going to have to come back later in court and make the allegation you now actually can identify this class, and the class is large enough to proceed as a class. Some people have often asked me, they go, how many people do you need for a class action? And there often isn't a bright line number on it. Of course, if it's going to be a state class action, it's different than if it's a class action in federal court. But generally speaking, what courts look at is, if I bring my action on behalf of my defective widget, and I'm forced to do it as a single action, will all the other people with their defective widgets then file their own single actions? And are all the actions going to look alike? And if they are, wouldn't you want to try them as a class? So they often look at judicial economy, whether it's easier for the court to handle this as a class than to handle all the separate actions that might happen. So that's one of the considerations. There are others. So they say they should have more than 100 people in this class, but the real question simply becomes how many people bought that exact printer or printers like it within the time frame that would be necessary to beat the statute of limitations. The lawsuit collected similar complaints against the company from online forums, which of course is one of those things where we like to believe that they're real, the complaints on the internet, but we actually don't know if they are. So that's interesting they have these, but these are not necessarily things that are admissible in court. There were complaints in Canon's own community forum. Since at least 2015, customers have been posting about not being able to use their scanners when their ink is low. In one response, a Canon representative said, "There is no workaround for this," according to the complaint. Now, if that's true, and if that was a Canon rep, it would appear that Canon knows what I accused them of knowing earlier, and that is whether or not they programmed these machines to do this, when Canon wouldn't immediately respond to a request for comment. So a Canon rep appears to have said this in a community forum, but again, not everything on the internet is true. The lawsuit accuses Canon of breach of express warranty, unjust enrichment, and several New York laws. They're represented by a law firm called Levy and Korzinski LLP. So there is a move in industry to get people away from owning things outright, but to where they are leasing them or renting them over time. And of course, the subscription model can make more money. And the example that the example that I'm burdened with is Adobe, the software maker that makes the software with which I edit my videos. And I owned a copy of Adobe Photoshop. I got a copy of that years ago. And I got the copy of it, and it was on a disk. I loaded it on all my computers, and I used Adobe Photoshop. And I owned Adobe Photoshop. Now, I understood when I got it that I may have to pay for updates down the road. But the interesting thing is that I never paid for any updates. I simply just kept using it because it kept working. And I never needed to update it because I didn't do anything that heavy with it. I didn't do massive work. I was cropping, changing some colors once in a while. Clone stamping, that's the big one, where you erase stuff from a photograph without people being able to see it was erased. And so a couple of years ago, I decided to start doing my videos with a better camera and editing them with better software. So I got Adobe Premiere. People ask me once in a while, they say, "Steve, what do you edit on?" I edit on Adobe Premiere. So I went and I asked people, and they said, "Steve, Adobe Premiere. Get Adobe Premiere. You're going to learn it, love it, live with it. It's the greatest thing ever for video editing." And so I got Adobe Premiere. Interestingly enough, though, when I signed up for it, you can't buy it. You have to pay a monthly service fee. That's how they sell it to you, a monthly fee. You pay the monthly fee, you get to use it for another month. Now, I don't have much of a problem with that, except that it does seem kind of strange to me. Because there is a program on my computer. I open the program up, I use the program, but I don't own it. And I know some people say, "Steve, a lot of programs on your computer you don't own. You're licensed to use them." But the difference here is that I know that if I don't pay this money every single month, I'm going to log in, it'll be shut off. You've got to pay the money. I have no problem, again, doing that. I knew that going in. But the bigger question here is that if Canon, if Canon was selling printers and actually said, well, when the printer runs out of ink, it's going to stop printing, you go, of course, it makes complete sense. The question is, if you put a non-Canon toner cartridge in there, ink cartridge, would it still work or not work? Because if it wouldn't work, you might have an argument with some kind of restraint of trade issue. But worse, to have it stop printing, but also stop its other functionality to force you to go buy a printer cartridge is actually very wrong, because some people might not need it to print. I've mentioned before that I have a fax number but no fax machine. In response to that, I got 3 faxes. Thank you very much, guys. And here's the thing. If you bought one of these machines and you were simply going to use it as a scanner, maybe someone bought it as a printer, decided they didn't like it as a printer, but they're still going to use it as a scanner. you should still have the right to use it as a scanner whether or not it's got an ink cartridge in it. Okay, so if it's true, what they're saying right here, I can see the plaintiffs winning this case. How much you can win? I don't know. $5 million? We'll see about that. More likely, members of the class will get a coupon for a discount on their next purchase of Canon ink. But we'll see what happens. So BusinessInsider.com ran the story. Man files class action lawsuit against Canon seeking more than $5 million in damages over printers that won't scan documents when ink cartridges are low. Kevin Shelby wrote it. Gordon, Keith, David, Sherry, Neil, John, Jason, Adam, Brian, Nathan, Steve, and Donald all sent it to me. Thanks a lot. Questions or comments, put them below. Let's talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching Lehto's Law. Nothing behind me, everything ahead of me, as is ever so on the road.